Hello! Today in this video we will make some snares, some more heavier ones, maybe some lighter ones, we will see how it goes, and I will talk about them. So that's basically the whole idea behind this video. So let's start! I want to start with something more recent for me, because I'm in my small snare era, but we will make heavier ones as well, so stick around. I want to start with something more light and with lots of expression control. Usually I really like using kick free, but you can do this in any synthesizer really. You only need a sine wave and a pitch modulation envelope, that's everything, and also the volume modulation envelope. We can turn up the envelope so it goes up to 20 kHz and make the transient very, very quick. Also make the length as short as possible and play with the volume envelope. Let's lay it down. Oh, that's way too low. Yeah, that's way too low. Let's bring it up to A3 as well. Now that's too long. And really what's the most demanding part of creating drums, I think, is to get a sense of time, and this will just come to you with practice, I swear. It is very important to be spot on with how many wave cycles you have, because sometimes even one wave cycle too long or too short can make a big difference and change the vibe of your drum. That's kind of too long. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Maybe let's lock the phase of this one, so we keep the wave shape that we have now and tweak the transient. And this is kind of nice, but I really don't want to spend ages doing that, because in abstraction this can sound very bad. So let's add another element to make this work. That would be definitely for me using Addictive Drums too, but the same thing as with kick free, you can use any drum samples, instrument, whatever. I just want to have some snare tone. That is C# one. So I will just make myself this thing where every note snaps to that note. So no matter what we play, we get the sound that we want. First I like to give the acoustic snare a little bit of a fade in so the synthetic transient can pop and be really pristine without any competing for space. Definitely I want to pitch this snare up, and I do that even for heavier ones, because the sound of snares in drum and bass pretty much came from speeding up acoustic breaks, and that kind of defined the timbre that you often are looking for, I think, and it just works very well. I'm tuning that by ear, and I think that is ultimately the best method out there. In the end, you always want to make your music with your ears, and I think that is this parabolic graph where you start, you tune everything by ear, and then you latch onto notes and making everything perfect, and then you realize that it is making it soulless, so you came back to tuning shit by ear. I'm looking for kind of boring tone, to be honest, because I imagine this one that we are making right now will be more utilitarian, so nothing really spectacular, something that works for the track and is not the track. this is only a warm-up for more intense snare hits later. Yeah, I'm turning the room reflections down. It competes with the second pitch that makes the overhead vary in pitch with the room. Or you know what? Let's be crazy. Let's try that. Maybe let's spread it out by 5 or 7 semitones. See what happens. That is actually good. I like it. I like it. Yep. Now let's EQ this acoustic snare, and I want to cut the low end of it to make it more synthetic and kind of new school. I know how to say it. That is not the best word. But that is definitely cleaner. Kind of sounds like the basketball. That's a bit annoying. Oh, actually, let's see how the waveform looks like. Yeah, that is way too dynamic. And we are missing a bit of a transient. So let's work on that. What's great for turning those acoustic, very dynamic recordings into something that works way better in bass music is some kind of saturation, right? I really like Saturn. And you can even kind of use your eyes, although I do not recommend that, to just get the dynamics right. So if you see the waveform to be squared off a little, yeah, something like that. So a bit of square going on, but definitely not too much. Keep your sounds a bit too dynamic so you can squash them later if needed. And also this definitely created a lot of intermodulation noise, but because it's so quick, I think it even works better than with cutting the low end. So let me isolate that for you. This thump, it comes from the Saturn, intermodulating all the shit and creating dirt, but yeah, without Saturn there's nothing. And with it, you can hear a low end plop, and this often adds so much life and vibe to your music. Just keep it. And now let's create a noisy layer. Let's draw the envelope for the noise. This is also very quick, so maybe 1/16th, maybe even quicker. Let's see. I usually tend to draw a shape like that. Also, the thing that I'm doing right now is I'm delaying the attack of the noise to not overlap with the transient or the part of a fundamental, and that is one of the biggest things in sound design ever, I feel. Because imagine that a sound waveform only have two axes. You have your y-axis and your x, and your y-axis is your amplitude, and x-axis is time. And it's very cool to look at it at a micro and macro scale. So, for example, if you have a very quick drum, you don't want to design it so every frequency happens at the same time. You pretty much want to separate it a little bit, create some harmony and some meaning behind that sequence. It's a very micro millisecond kind of a sequence, but it is a sequence. And also with explosions, you don't want to, as an example of something bigger, right? You don't want to create your explosion sound right on the first fucking sample, just blow every frequency up. That would be just a noise and it will not be very interesting. But if you give every frequency some time, and here we can hear an example of what I'm talking about. And now I want to modulate the sound of that noise with a velocity. And now let's filter the noise. Let's do a high pass inside of ShaperBox. Now we can look at it from a bit different perspective. Yeah. And listen to the difference that makes. And what is very helpful when making drums is to reference other drums that you love. That is basically how I learned to make snares that I like and kicks that I like, whatever. I was looking at the waveforms of drums that sounded good to me. And what you are looking for the most is the time, again, the time axis, so the x-axis, how long is the transient, how long is the body when the noise comes up, because other things I feel like are easier to hear. You can hear like, oh right, this is a bright sound, or this is it has a lot of movement, but when it comes to that very specific, very precise timing, this can get tough. So let's see. That's pretty much what I like. That does look good for me. But we can take it a step further, maybe a saturator on that. But this will crush your transient so much. So let's take a look. Yeah, the transient is completely smacked. Sometimes it's cool. I feel like here it even works a bit better. It gets rid of that blobby ploppy kind of feeling and makes it more hard. So whatever, use your ears. Sometimes bad is good and good is bad. Yeah, that does look very solid. So it's almost always about how long those cycles are and how low or high they are. It is a matter of practice though. So let's create, let's bounce it off, let's bounce it out. And shall we begin making a very tough and a very big snare right now? I think, yeah. And I will use different tools this time to show you that you can create your fundamental in any synth and noise in any synth. So let's make it completely different. Let's flip it. So now I will use Serum as my fundamental sine wave generator. And for that, I will present to you my newest invention, which is not my invention at all, but it just came to me when you are tuning your sound. I thought that let's tune my snare fundamental to the root note of a track that was something around F or E. Let's do E, so it's heavy, or even let's do D sharp. And I wanted to have some pitch variation on the snare, so I wanted the fundamental to go sometimes a bit higher and be more tonal, and go sometimes a bit lower and be more physical. That's actually a good foundation already. So let's place it down, maybe for now like this. So with heavier snares I really like to have a longer running oscillation. So we have around 5-6 cycles. That's about good, and really trust your ears on that. This is just a starting point. Let's have another harmonic series. Let's use it for our transient. Let's automate the pitch of this one. A tiny little plop. That's cool. And that is pretty much all we need. Now let's bring back the acoustic layer and make it way lower. To continue that thought of making it very different from our previous attempt, I will remove the Serum noise, and let's use some real life recordings. This is my recording of baking soda and vinegar in my shower, and that sounded kind of cool. So we have this almost noise signal that is not a noise, and I want to make it a bit shorter.